should we do something similar here in Britain? We're joined now by Belinda De Lucy, former MEP for the Brexit Party, and Ivan Sampson, immigration lawyer. Good morning to you both. Belinda, Martin and I were discussing this, and the idea that Rishi Sunak or any Prime Minister would ever give the British public a referendum on this seems pie in the sky, because why would you ask people a question where we kind of know the answer anyway? And also, what could they ever do about it when they have confirmation from the British public that this is what people would actually want?
Unfortunately, I think decades of EU membership has had a very corrosive impact on the culture in Westminster. I think it's made them very suspicious of democracy. I think that was seen in 2016 when we had a huge democratic expression. It was a beautiful day. We decided to vote to leave the EU, and the spasm they had, the meltdown they had at a democratic vote, reflected a Westminster that had fallen out of love with democracy. Now, I mean, it's very sad. It was a big bad day for the mother of all parliaments. Has it changed? Will it respect a referendum result if we have one now? Perhaps not, but I can't be sure. And look, like many, I have huge compassion for those struggling around the world, but I will never be convinced that the solution is to fling open our doors to all the poor and the suffering of the world. We just simply can't do that. So a referendum is needed to cap the numbers and to reaffirm the eligibility of asylum seekers, to make sure the bar is set higher so we protect those most at risk from certain death. We need a referendum on that, but what a sad reflection that we need a referendum on our current political status, that they can't even perform the basic duty of controlling our borders and protecting our country. Shame on them.
Great. So Ivan Sampson, now let's turn to you, because this is going to put Prime Minister Morawiecki on a huge collision course with the European Union. I don't know if you've seen the video, but it's quite spicy. It shows, I don't know if we can play that now so people can see that at home. The video shows scenes of streets burning, of looting. There's the Prime Minister now. You can see burning of cars, and there's a guy licking a knife, overturned cars, looting of shops. This is put out by the Polish Prime Minister, pushing towards this referendum. But what I want to ask you, as somebody with legal insight, where is the legal founding for this? Because presumably, Ivan, he's going to be on a huge collision course with both the EU and, of course, our friends, the European Convention on Human Rights, of which Poland is a member, and yet they're holding a referendum in abject defiance of both of those institutions.
Indeed, but also with the Refugee Convention itself. What's the question going to be asked to the public? Do we not accept any asylum seekers? Is that the question? Do we don't let anybody in at all?
Well, I think
what is the question? We don't know what that is.
What they've said, what the ruling party has said, and Morawiecki has said, is he wants to ask voters in a referendum whether they support accepting, and I quote, thousands of illegal immigrants from the Middle East and Africa. And
then it goes further on to say, under the forced relocation mechanism imposed by the European bureaucracy. So to be clear, this is a divvying up of the illegals that have entered the European landmass, and the European Union has decided where they're going to be put within the member states without there being consultation other than a vote at the European Parliament. You and I know, Belinda, is at best, shall we say, fig leaf democracy. So the Polish are saying, we don't want to be told what to do. We're going to hold a referendum on it. So what I want to hear from you, Ivan, do they have a legal right to do that? Or as a lawyer, would you be challenging that, as we've seen time and time again in the UK?
Well, look, the Poland is part of the European Convention and also signatory to the Refugee Convention. So whether they accept the quota by the EU, that's an internal dispute with the EU. For every asylum seeker that comes to Polish borders, they've got to decide that asylum application within the terms and clauses of the Refugee Convention and uphold the right as enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights. I never thought I would agree with Belinda, but she's absolutely right what she says, that we do need a quota. We need to have a cap. We can't help everyone. We just simply can't do that. We can't accept millions of people coming to the country, but we've got to accept our fair share. And at the moment, the way it's all structured is you physically have to be in the UK to claim asylum. That is the problem, which is why people are coming here. If there was a system where you could claim asylum without actually being here, that would work much better. I also agree with Belinda about the threshold of evidential burden. It's far too low at the moment. It was designed that way because the Refugee Convention knew that when people are fleeing persecution, they may not have any identity documents. The problem we're having is that people are actually disposing of those documents with intention of disguising where they're actually from. So I think that's absolutely right. What she says, I agree with her totally.
Ivan, can I just ask you specifically about the Afghan resettlement system? Because when the West pulled out of Afghanistan, we'd committed to taking 20,000 Afghan people within the coming years, and this was January 22, and 5,000 within the first year. We've already taken 22,000 within the first year. As an immigration lawyer, do you see that as a failure of that system?
Well, no, I think it worked really well, the Afghan system, and so did the Syrian also policy of bringing Syrians to the UK. There's countries where there's conflict, and this country took its fair share. That's what it has to do right across the board on an annual basis. As I said, we can't help everyone, but we have to help our fair share. Germany takes 27% of the EU burden of refugees. Turkey has 3 million people. Jordan has 1 million, Pakistan has over 1 million. We don't take enough. I keep saying that we need to take our fair share. And once we've taken our fair share, that our conscience should be clear on that. But again, I point out to the fact that you shouldn't physically have to be in the UK to claim asylum. Yeah. You should be able to do it online through technology. We should be able to interview people that want to come here using technology to do that. And there's no reason why people physically have to be in the UK to claim asylum.
Belinda, I want to put it to you. You're shaking your head there. Why don't you first go back to Ivan's point there? The answer is to make it easier to apply for asylum in the UK from abroad. What's your take on that?
My take is England is a very, very small country and it is highly populated. It's one of the most highly populated countries already in Europe. We have finite space, we have finite resources and money. So I think already we take beyond our fair share of people resettling in the UK as asylum seekers. I think we should go direct only to UN approved refugee camps, take absolutely no one who comes here via irregular routes, take 50% women, because that's what's never being mentioned. It's all these young, fit men who seem to have enough cash to pay the smugglers to shop through all the safe countries. We need to take half women and children, cap it at 20,000 a year to resettle here. Doesn't mean we can't help refugees in the camps financially nearer to the conflict zones. It just means we're a very small island. We can't take the same amount as France and Germany. We don't have the space or infrastructure to support that number. We have to prioritise and cap it at 20,000 resettling in here, and half have to be women and children. Currently, we are a free-for-all for anyone. Think about it. 30 countries are at conflict at the moment, in conflicts. That means 30 countries around the world, the people have the right to claim asylum here. Over 60 countries have made homosexuality illegal. That means everyone in those countries would have the right to apply for asylum here. We need to raise the bar very, very high, like Japan, who's also a member of the Refugee Convention. They only accept between 100 and 200 people a year because their eligibility is high. It stops fraud, it stops abuse, and it protects the most at risk. I think we should head down a route of limiting, capping and protecting the most vulnerable directly from camps.
And Belinda, can I quickly ask you, the Prime Minister of Poland is going to be on a collision course with the European Union here. He's defying them abjectly. Don't forget he did the same when he blockaded the border from Belarus with soldiers and barbed wire to keep illegals coming over that the Russians wanted to go into Poland to destabilise his country. Belinda, as a Brexiteer, do you think the spirit of Brexit could catch on? Could we see the beginnings of Pole exit?
Well, look, I admire and respect how proud the Polish Prime Minister and his party is in defending his nation state and his people. I can only dream of us having a government that has the spine to put British interests first and protect our borders instead of all this peacocking on the international stage with Macron and Biden that our government, and Labour would be much worse, by the way, seems so happy to do. So I do think if the EU do not allow, if they ban it completely and they reject the referendum, the spotlight will shine very clearly on the anti-democratic nature of the EU, and I think Euroscepticism will set a light in Europe if the EU go on a collision course with Poland's right to self-determine its own laws outside the EU, because they are a nation state, which we know the EU hate. Good for Poland, although I don't agree with a lot of the PM's rhetoric and style of video. I do think that was a little bit much.
Ivan, can we just, one last question to you. We're starting to hear now, it's making it into the mainstream conversation a little bit about the UN's Agenda 2030 and the fact that by 2030, anybody who wishes to seek asylum in a different country will be considered a climate migrant. Can you just, I don't know whether you're aware of that or whether you know an awful lot about that, but if you do, can you just explain to us what that might mean?
No, I'm not aware about being a climate migrant, and it's certainly not within the Refugee Convention or the European Convention on Human Rights. So that's outside my sphere of expertise.
OK, all right, not to worry. We might cover that tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, just I do know a bit about it, and it basically means in the future, if climate change became a significant issue in countries such as North Africa, then it would be deemed their human right to leave that territory and our human right to accept them, and that is an awful lot of people.
Yeah. And then you might be out of a job, Ivan, because we would basically be living in a borderless world thanks to climate change. Thank you both so much, Belinda De Lucy and Ivan Sampson, their immigration lawyer. Good to see you both.